Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our 10th DeZIM talk, Unforeseen Disaster in Afghanistan, Transnational Perspectives on Afghan Refugee Protection. My name is Zeynep Yanaşmayan, and I'm the head of the Migration Department at DeZIM, which is a German Center for Integration and Migration Research. Today's event is hosted by DeZIM and co-hosted by MERGE, which is a collaborative research network that is based at the Berlin Institute for Empirical Research on Integration and Migration, in short BIM, at the Humboldt University of Berlin, and that brings together migration scholars with a focus on the Middle East. Today, we will be discussing the dire situation in Afghanistan leading up to and after the Taliban takeover of the country. As migration scholars, our expertise, interest, and most importantly, concern lie here with internal displacement and international protection needs of Afghan people. Recent estimates put the number of currently displaced to more than 500,000 since the start of the year, with about more than 2.5 million already living outside of the borders under UNHCR mandate, mainly in the neighboring countries of Iran and Pakistan, but also in Turkey and in Germany. We do have a wonderful lineup of panelists today who will help us shed light on the current situation and possibly future scenarios, particularly when it comes to the reactions of European and neighboring states to the increasing protection needs of Afghan people. So today we're lucky to have with us Dr. Nader Talebi, who's a postdoctoral researcher at the Berlin Institute for Integration and Migration Research, and he was the coordinator of MERGE. He has done extensive research on transnational migration and on Afghan refugees in Iran. We also have Kava Spartak, who's head of YAR, an Afghan migrant organization in Germany that supports Afghan refugees through a variety of means, including language course, legal counseling, projects related to empowerment and political participation, but also cultural and educational aspects. We also have Masuwa Torfa, who's a doctoral researcher at the University of Hohenheim, and her research focuses on the migration of Afghans and Syrians, their integration opportunities and challenges, as well as the role of influential actors in these processes. We also have Hannah Poole, who's a researcher at the Max Planck Institute for the Study of Societies in Germany. And in her research, she conducted a multi-sited ethnography on undocumented migration trajectories accompanying Afghan refugees on their way from Iran through Turkey, Greece, and Bosnia. Currently, she's a Charlemagne Press Academy Fellow at the Compass Institute of Oxford University. We are very, very grateful to all of you for making this possible on such a short notice. And without further ado, I would like to start our discussion by relying on our speakers' long-standing interest and expertise on Afghan migrants that will also, of course, help us contextualize and also a bit historicize what some commentators already call an exodus. So my first question would be, what is it that we are currently witnessing from Afghanistan? And if you may start, Masuma, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much for organizing this very important event at this very critical moment. And thank you for having me here. Actually, this is a major humanitarian catastrophe, very unfortunately. We know that it's not only a humanitarian catastrophe, but politically, economic, and health catastrophe that's coming in the country that we are witnessing from very different parts of the world, very unfortunately.
Thank you very much.
We see that the WFP, for example, in Afghanistan, they have reported that Afghanistan will run out of food by September if the situation continues like this. Besides the political crisis, the evacuation, the chaotic situation of the evacuation process by the international community, leading by the US, that itself leads to so many chaotic situations in the country, which is partly because of this calendar-based decisions of the European and the Western military evacuation. We know that not only that, but the health organizations such as WHO, they have reported that the medical transportation in the necessary parts of the Afghanistan, they're also stuck. They cannot go there anymore. We have witnessed, very unfortunately, we talk to people back in Afghanistan with our family members, that they see on daily basis, they experience torture, persecution, and very inhuman treatment in different parts of the country, besides the international Kabul International Airport, which is the main and only focus of the Western social and media. So that is actually, I'm very happy that today we get the opportunity to talk about this this catastrophe that has happened and the role of the Western, especially European Union and Germany on that, and the future, what will happen in the future, what who has the different stakeholders, possibilities, responsibilities, and their roles in the future. So I think for this moment at the beginning, that much introduction is enough, and I will continue later.
Thank you very much, Masuma. We will be touching upon all of these questions that you raised, and thank you very much for that. Kava, maybe we would like to say something.
I mean, I can only underline what my colleague Mrs. Torfa just emphasized, that we're talking about a catastrophe, and I would like to add that it was not an unforeseen catastrophe, like the question was the question of this panel actually is. It was not unforeseen. It was well foreseen. It was well foreseen for more than 7 years now by the countries that were involved in this. Both, I would say, a combat and as well as a peacekeeping mission. They were well aware of it, and so we have a catastrophe that we are totally responsible for, our countries, our European countries, but also Australia, Canada, US, and so on. And I would like to emphasize the point of view of refugees and asylum seekers, not only within the European borders, but also all across the world, and the neighboring countries, but also in Turkey, and in the foreseeable future also in Central Asian former Soviet republics. So we will see another humanitarian catastrophe, and we should focus on the mistakes of the past. That for instance, in the 1980s, the Afghan refugees, the exodus of Afghan refugees to Iran was completely left behind by the international community. They completely focused on Pakistan, and now we will have this. We should focus on every country, and particularly the European countries. They should now come up with their own responsibility for all Afghan asylum seekers who entered the European Union in the last 10 years. And we should not only focus on those that have been evacuated recently in the last 10 days, but we have to find a solution and a new approach, a more humane approach, a more just approach towards all Afghan refugees within the European Union, particularly those who are living in unimaginable conditions in the Greek islands, as well as in the Balkan routes, but also in the Eastern European countries.
Thank you very much for your intervention, Kawa. Hannah, would you like to add something or say your take on this?
Yes, thank you very much. I can just emphasize what Masuma Jan said, but here now we see also a change, and this is that, as Kawa said, since the 1980s, so over 4 decades, Afghans have been displaced, there has been mobility, and there has been mobility to seek at least a passage out of the country. But this has changed now, and the borders of Afghanistan are as closed as they haven't been in a very long time. And together with this, it's not only the Afghan border to Iran or Pakistan, but also at the same time, the Turkish border, which is now fortified as a wall of 40 kilometers, has been strengthened. And on the same day that actually Kabul was seized, the EU had just strengthened the border between Turkey and Greece. So we do not see a movement that would allow people to really move away from the dangers, but rather we see that the fortification of borders in the region towards Western Europe, towards the EU, has been closed down. And I would just like to stress, like the others, that a lot of attention is on the evacuation of Kabul right now and on the airport, but actually people from the provinces where we get so little news from, if we are not in personal contact with people, has really becomes such a dire situation, and we see people locked in between trying to get into safety.
Yeah, we will be discussing in a minute the idea of safe passages, but Nader, maybe you would like to first say your opinion.
Yes, thank you, Zainab and others panelists. In order not to repeat whatever said before by my colleagues, I just want to say that there's also this narratives of shock, basically, exactly as others said, that it was unforeseen, we didn't know, but exactly the expectation was that, okay, we thought that the government would hold the power for 3 more months, for example, and it was no thinking about what will happen after that, basically. So yeah, we see a disaster and we see an unbelievable level of hypocrisy, from Western powers, from international powers, basically. Either it's a matter of disrespect for life and livelihood of people in Afghanistan, or trying to put it as an exception, as if it was not their mobility of Afghans, and the issue of security there. So I like to think with others if we can manage, how is this possible? How is it possible to neglect part of the people in a world, that crying out loud for finding mutual solution for everything from COVID to climate change, in this kind of conditions, this time that we live, we are seeing this way of isolating or basically ignoring life of people in Afghanistan. I think we will later talk about other countries also, but I think it's good for a start. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. At this point, I would also like to remind our live audience that they can pose their questions if they want through the YouTube chat functions, and we will try to integrate it to the questions that we have already foreseen about asking you. You have touched on already in your opening statements to a lot of the issues that we would like to discuss today. One thing that, I think I will move directly to the then more policy questions that we have in the role of the European states in this. From the media, we can of course gather a sense, very strong sense, that the containment strategies are very prevalent in the region, but also in Europe. We hear a lot about these makeshift camps at the Iranian and Pakistani borders. We hear about the erection of a wall, and as Hannah was mentioning, also further securitization of the Turkish border, both at the eastern end, but also towards Greece. So how do we expect the situation to further develop here? What kind of mobility options will be made available? What kind of mobility restrictions we will be seeing? Hannah, maybe you want to take up on this again.
For now, and I would be happy to hear the opinion of the other three, but for now, I see only the restrictions getting stronger. I see a small channel of evacuations that took over for the last days via the airport, but I haven't seen any mobility passages really forming or any plans to think about how to allow people to move away across the borders. At the same time, I just see the rhetorics of fear over migration being repeated over and over on a media narrative, while at the same time on the ground really fortifying these borders, not just on the borders that were just mentioned, but also just along all the countries leading on the groundway after Greece towards, for example, Germany. I'd be happy to hear the others, but right now I don't see a passage opening up. I just see a fortification and securitization of the borders.
Thank you. You can also, by the way, jump into discussion whenever you don't have to wait for me to give the floor. But Nader, maybe you want to say something, especially on the case of Iran in this case.
Yes. I totally agree with what Hannah said. In case of Iran, I was talking with activists and people working sort of Iranian Red Cross, that they made some camps in the border. But actually what we see is the pushbacks. So they send everyone back to Afghanistan, from these temporary camps that they have with the Iranian border. And it's amazing that no one never basically respect the sovereignty of the Afghan, the government in Afghanistan before, but now they're respecting whatever Taliban, wants them to do. Basically, from the U.S. government that say that, oh, we cannot extend this deadline for evacuation, to the Iranian government, who are concerned that if we make so many tents here, then Taliban would see, and this would be bad for us. They send people, apart from the wall in the border that they make, they send people back in a very, very bad situation, like injured people. I heard basically. And the usual situation for Afghans in Iran was very bad for a long time. After 40 years, we don't have any naturalization, any like basic rights that makes life a little bit possible. We have restriction on mobility inside the country. And we also have this harsh deportation experiences even before, in 48 hours, sending back people, those who never been to Afghanistan. So talk with people, the first time they were being in Afghanistan was after deportation from Iran. They born in Iran, they grew up in Iran, then they were deported to Afghanistan. So now what we see is that they want to make sure that the Iranian government at least want to make sure that no many Afghans would enter. So if they're stuck in the border, they will make sure to send them back. They did also with Afghan soldiers, that they escaped Taliban, came to Iran. They send them all back, basically. So that's the situation on the border with Iran. On the border with Turkey, we have the wall, and also usual, basically, shooting and stopping people from crossing border.
Yeah, if I may just add here, for Turkish case, of course, it's also a well-known fact that the Afghan migrants and refugees are living in an extremely precarious situation in Turkey as well, very similar to what you have described in Iran. They're doing actually the most exploitative works, and without any prospect for legal pathways for securing their livelihood there. So this is also a very dire situation in Turkey, and it has been a politically very heated topic in the last months, even before the takeover of Taliban. That there has been from political opposition, but also currently from the government as well, that there's no more reception for further refugees. So that's also a very difficult situation. Masuma and Kawa, does one of you want to jump into the discussion at this point? I guess, yeah, Kawa, please.
I actually showed Masuma John this assign. Maybe she should start, but I can start as well. I mean, we should be really careful with the framing of all of this, and as I said in the beginning, with this unforeseen, we should definitely not use this anymore. It was not unforeseen, but also it was not a takeover by the Taliban. It was a handover to the Taliban, and it was a planned handover. We will see this in the future. A lot of people from the Afghan government will try to hide this fact. A lot of other people will expose a lot of facts, and if there would be any commissions who in all of the respective countries, and European countries, but also in the US and Canada and Australia, they have to analyze the whole mission and try to find out what went wrong, and then we'll find out that it was a handover. And I want to build a small bridge towards this whole situation when we're talking about handing over Afghanistan after 20 years to terrorists, so to say, because they actually bombed their way to the negotiation table with suicide attacks, with kidnappings, and with targeted killings of Afghan civilians, but also of foreign humanitarian workers. So it is a terrorist organization in many countries in the international community, and they were handed over the government of Afghanistan. It was handed over to them, and it is within this framework of humiliating the people of Afghanistan, the so many million people of Afghanistan, that they hand over their country after 20 years of failure to a terrorist organization, and then humiliating the many millions and thousands of people who have to leave the country within the borders of democratic countries, within borders of European Union, but also staying silent about the situation in Pakistan, staying silent about the situation in Iran and in Turkey. So I have the feeling that the whole international community is politicizing this whole issue for their right-wing rhetorics and right-wing agenda within their respective countries. Iran and Pakistan do this for a very long time, and Turkey is starting doing this every now and then. And now we see that this is happening within the European borders. So I think it is. There is a time where we Afghans also have to stand up and raise our voices towards this, because I'm realizing this whole rhetoric is going two ways in a certain way. One is saying has this victim mentality and is saying, please help us, and we're actually asking for help to the creator of this monster every day. We're asking them for help. Please help us now. And on the other hand, we're still like I hear many people say, look, they have left us behind after 20 years. Now we don't want them to ever come back and ever intervene in Afghanistan in any sort of a way. So we will try to find our way out or survive. So this is going to two extremes, and we have to find a different approach towards this, because it can become dangerous for the people inside Afghanistan, but also for the many people who are outside of Afghanistan. That the political rhetoric and also the politicization of the whole issue within the Afghan refugee community can turn into a completely different direction.
Thank you very much, Kawa, for such a strong message that you sent. We have an interesting question from the audience that I would like to raise it to you. And that is basically there, and you have rightly criticized the situation that is currently, that it was not foreseen. It was a calendar-based intervention. So the question is, how could the withdrawal have been managed differently? Is there anyone who wants to say something on that?
Yeah, let me just go forward. Actually, that is the question of management. You know, the international community long ago wanted to leave Afghanistan, and there is, you know, a information gap here, the lack of management, the lack of coordination, and there is the problem, the lack of communication with the previous government of Afghanistan. And then the international community within themselves, their estimations were wrong. They themselves said, for example, and that was actually what the people of Afghanistan also depended on. They said, you know, there were people who wanted to leave Afghanistan, who are in the condition to leave, who have the visa, who could leave the country, but could not do it. For those people, it was an unforeseen situation, actually. And that there is a huge question still for this question of foreseen or unforeseen. And if that was foreseen, why there was nothing to prevent it? Why didn't they, for example, the international community, including Germany? Afghanistan has been the longest mission of Germany, 20 years, over 20 years time they have, Germany, we are specifically now talking about Germany here, and including the international community, they have spent the longest mission in the history in a country, and the biggest partner country of Germany is Afghanistan in its history, and the largest amount of money is invested in the country. And at the end, I don't know if they will somehow evaluate this one as a success story. Is it not a failure if they went there for the promise to help the people of Afghanistan? It was that time, regardless of the political situation there. What structure will be there? That was actually promised to be democracy, women rights, democracy in the country. But that is what the people of Afghanistan are asking now. There are thousands of words of betrayal. People are really helpless and hopeless. So actually, they were not expecting this to happen to them. There are thousands of people, you know, who have not directly worked with the international or German military, but they have indirectly got benefited from this. And that is all coming close to zero now. So that is actually the question. Now that the international community, including Germany, that promised to continue humanitarian support to the people of Afghanistan who have either left Afghanistan to the neighboring countries or want to leave, the first and urgent thing in this emergency situation is to make sure that those who are vulnerable and who want to leave Afghanistan should be allowed to do that. They should be, the conditions should be facilitated for them to leave the country. And if by 31st of August, the international military comes out of the country and those who are eligible to leave the country and cannot, that is actually also part of the direct and immediate responsibility of the international community being there. That should be actually now focused. We do point to two different responsibilities. One, immediate types of responsibilities for the people of Afghanistan. I'm talking about the people, not about the political regime that's coming and what is happening to the politics, and if the new political leaders are ready to do something for the country, if they could build a government that, that's actually far from discussion for now. And in the long term, for example, for Afghans in the neighboring countries, statements are not enough. Their countries, international community, everyone is just writing statements nowadays. We hear, okay, UNHCR, we urge the neighboring countries to keep the borders open. But the situation in the borders in Pakistan and Iran, they're worse than the international airport, and no one is reporting that. And I'm afraid of the absence of the international journalism and international media, the absence of media from Afghanistan, and that is a huge risk. Actually, Germany, including the international community, at least should make sure that the international media presence keep continuing in the country to report what is happening in the country, what violation of human rights. Women are now stopped to go to their works. They're officially, yesterday, the day before, they have announced that working women should stay at home for now. So that is, we don't know what the definition behind the Sharia law will be in the future. So that is actually these things, if now the understanding of the normal, the common, the people in Afghanistan is this, that 31st of August will be end of international community, the humanitarian organizations and media, international media and everything. They think that they will be locked in the dark from the 1st of September, which is really, really heartbreaking, especially for us who are in the Western countries and cannot do anything for our family members. So that is hurtful. That is something that actually, something needs to be done for that. Borders to the immediate neighboring countries should be kept open. And if the international, the Germans, for example, and European Union, they continue their humanitarian support, they should make sure that the humanitarian support is actually for the humanitarian needs, for those who are in necessity of the humanitarian needs. If they do not have the security of their humanitarian support and aid in the country, how can they make sure that that actually happens? In our neighboring, some of my family's neighboring area in Kabul, a hospital that was run by internationals is closed now. It's actually, the door is shut and there is no one there. It's not operating anymore because they're afraid of their security. So those things should be really taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Masuma. I mean, it's also great to hear this, exactly what is missing in this debate that we are not hearing. Thank you very much for sharing this with us. Nader.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Masuma. I just want to add to that, Yani. Of course, we need this stuff that Masuma said, but I just want to also add that this is not even close to enough, basically. It should not prevent us from asking also more fundamental question, basically, that how is it that these kind of decisions is possible, basically? So to me, I don't believe this rhetoric on unforeseen, or we are shocked that these things happen. And these are only excuses. I also don't believe that we go to help women's rights and other claims that they make, because look at the Western countries. They're working with the worst horrible dictators, misogynists in the world. It's just a good excuse to invade countries, and it's not good enough to stay and take responsibility for the situation that you have a lot of, contribution to it, basically. So to me, it sounds like the European countries, the West, is saying that we don't care, what do you do to your people, as long as it will not affect us, either by migration, or by sending terrorists or whatever. So don't attack us, it's fine, just do whatever you want, because your lives are not important. Or because these geographies are geographies of terror, as if the world is divided to a civilized world, with the Europe, West, and others. And then these lands that belongs to Islamists, belongs to terrorists, belongs to whoever, and the only responsibility we have is to make sure that people cannot cross that border, that wall that prevent us from their attacks. This is horrible to watch, Of course, they should provide humanitarian urgent support to those who stuck there. But I also want to add to that this also tells a lot about the stand of the European Union, the stand of USA and other Western countries, on the issues of human rights, on all the excuse that normally used, for invasion and justification, basically. To me, the shock discourse is a justification to pass this window of high discussion on Afghanistan. They just want to get away with it, basically, with the disasters that happened there.
Thank you very much. Another Hannah and Kawai, unless you want to say something, I would like to put another question that actually wraps up a little bit these points that are being raised. So basically what we're discussing here, that we're talking about the neighboring countries increasingly closing their doors and announcing and doing illegal pushbacks. On the other hand, we recently had also European Commissioner for Home Affairs that announced that EU should not wait to intervene before Afghan refugees arrive at the external borders and offer financial support to neighboring countries. So where does this situation lead us in terms of where do the Afghan refugees go? What are the longer-term perspectives that we can think of here? Shorter, but also longer. So we discussed safe passages are necessary, but they're not enough. And I would like to merge that also with a question that we received from the audience, which is about resettlement. So there has been, we do hear, of course, a lot from the head of states in terms of not wanting to sort of receive refugees in European territories. But on the other hand, we have municipalities and other actors that are basically trying to, civil society initiatives that are making the case for receiving some refugees, even though, of course, this is also a short-term solution. Just reception of people over here doesn't gonna undo 20 years of mistakes that you all have been mentioning very nicely. So my question is, what's your take on this? What could be the way forward, and what's your take on the municipalities' call for receiving more people over here? Hannah, maybe you want to go first on this one.
Yes, thank you. If we are talking about resettlement, we should keep in mind that the UNHCR's resettlement program absolutely failed in the case of Afghanistan. There were so few Afghans who had the chance to actually apply for resettlement and were then actually sent outside of the country. So if we are talking about resettlement, especially with the municipalities, this would have to be an actually serious attempt that would be better organized, but also that would actually take place. So I'm a little bit worried that talking about resettlement remains within the sphere of talking about it. And that we see Afghans leaving the country for the last 4 decades shows that people were aware of the dangers in different timeframes. And the rise of Afghans leaving towards Western Europe ever since 2013, 14 actually shows how many people did not trust the narrative that there would be a safety or some kind of future within a certain setting. So I think in that, we need to remember that the passages are closed. I mean, if people make it all the way to Croatia, for example, there are pushbacks from there. Along the Balkan route, there are pushbacks. From Greece to Turkey are pushbacks. From Turkey to Iran are pushbacks. And then finally the pushbacks, or just the deportations from Iran to Afghanistan. So in that, I would hope that there would be a resettlement or that there would be a safe passage. But I've not seen these initiatives in the past. And I'm really afraid that this will stay just a rhetoric.
Okay, anyone else would like to jump on that? On the question?
I mean, Nader, maybe you please. Oh, that's okay. I mean, what we need here is an international approach, and we should also find new solutions, as Nader said in the beginning, that when we're facing global crises, we have to also find a global solution towards them. And whenever we have global crises, as the coronavirus, as the ever-growing catastrophes with regards to climate change, and now we have a global crisis with regards to the Afghan exodus. We should call it an exodus because I think only very few people in Afghanistan can or want to stay in Afghanistan. So if they can, they want to leave the country. I mean, this is going on for 3 generations now. So we have to find global solutions in this regard. And with global, I mean, including the neighboring countries, including Russia, including China, including India. This was missed in 20 years of this whole Afghanistan politics and policies. And for this upcoming migration crisis, we have to find a global solution towards this. But also, I think the countries and being involved in the 20 years of whatever you want to call it, peacekeeping mission or war on terror, whatever it's being called, they have a huge responsibility towards finding the solution. And there has to be a resettlement program for Afghans who are in danger, because they were believing in democracy and this whole idea of the last 20 years. For people who worked with the international military and organizations, they have not evacuated everybody. I have the feeling they have just evacuated their own citizens and some other of their co-workers. But those people in danger, they haven't been evacuated, and there has to be a resettlement program. And of course, there has to be also it has to be done from one country to the other. So if we're moving people, if people are being moved or are moving, themselves towards Iran or Pakistan, then we have to move people from Greece towards Central and Northern Europe, so that other people who are moving towards Turkey and Greece can actually find refuge there in the first place. And then we have to find resettlement programs. We have the example of the Vietnamese resettlement programs that was going on for 2 decades, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people. And we have to find a solution for this for the Afghan asylum seekers, because it is a burden on the whole global community, and particularly among the Western countries.
Thank you very much, Kawa. Nader, you want to add something?
Yeah, I can add a little bit. Yeah, that what makes me sick basically is to see that this become also an instrument, a bargaining chip in the hands of countries like Iran and Turkey, because they have their own issues, problems. So now they can use it to put pressure on Europe, basically, because of this overall approach to migration in Europe, and overall, I would say, pseudo-colonial approach, to the region, basically. It makes it possible for a state like Iran, or Turkey to use life of people as a bargaining chip, basically. And also on the other side of it, as Kaveh said, they handed the government to Taliban, and now, with the excuse that, okay, in order to defend, the achievements of the last 20 years, now we need to talk with Taliban, basically. So sort of also normalizing Taliban as a normal government, basically, that we need to begin negotiating with, and that they have done it for a while now, basically. So my concern is that the only concern in Europe is this short-term political interest of politicians to stop people from coming here, with any narratives possible, whether it's aid to transit countries or other stuff. But what is in practice happening is to make sure that with so many levels of obstacles, in the way to Europe, basically, they make sure that fewer of people can come. And also, they do it also already in Afghanistan. Today I heard that they offer money to those who want to stay in Afghanistan and not, be a part of evacuation. So we give you 1 year of salary if you stay there, for those who work in, for example, with German institutes. That's the main source of problem, I would say. This colonial approach, which is based on stopping people from moving toward Europe, because that's the disaster for them. And as long as there's a possibility, this would be on a map. Just look at Yemen, for example, because refugees cannot reach Europe. It's not a part of discussion, basically. It's not a problem for Europe. They're just asking, are they coming to us? Is this my problem also? How can I fix this problem by externalize it to other geographies or externalize it to the future, basically? So they will not come till the election. They will not come,
Yeah, thank you very much. That reminds me maybe one more question on this, because we've talked quite a lot about the macro level policies and global, actually, what could be done to resolve this issue in the most dignified way possible. But I would like to also rely on your expertise, because you all had a lot of experience working with individual refugees. So I would like to ask you also a little bit about what do you think would be at this point the aspirations and capabilities of mobility from the part of Afghan people? Would they want to rather remain in the region, possibly, or actually, they would want to move further away? Would they be able to do so even if they wanted to? So that will be the question. Maybe, I don't know what Masuma or Hannah, one of you go first.
Yes, thank you for this question. Before coming to this, I actually wanted to point something to your last question on the solutions, the short term and the long term, the short term possibilities that could be provided in the European Union or Germany specifically, and then in the neighboring countries. I think what could be facilitated is the family reunifications for those who are in Europe and in Germany. There are hundreds and thousands of applications for family reunification running for months and sometimes years. Because there was no German embassy active within Afghanistan, they had to run to different countries with a lot of struggles to Pakistan and to India. Those should be actually given priority, whatever way possible that they could somehow, because they do have the right to reunify with their family members in Europe and in Germany. And then the other thing, that possibility of involvement of diaspora organizations and population within the European Union and Germany, if they are involved somehow, if there is no specific policy that this diaspora population and organizations could actively get involved in the process to support, their families, and also to support the bigger missions of these countries. So that is, for example, the definition of the family. It could be somehow extended in this during the emergency times, that could, give the opportunity to a wider number of population to save those at risk. So that will be, Canadian examples could be, for example, some policies that they do have in place, like the Group of Five, the community support, sponsorships, and so on. So those are the complementary pathways: familiar reunification, resettlement that was spoken about, sponsorships and scholarships for those who are eligible for these ways that could support them. And within the neighboring countries, it is also part of my research. Actually, I have written something on the origin and transit migration of Afghans and Syrians to Europe, and specifically to Germany, and what actors and factors play a role there. And one of the very specific things I have found here, actually, and I have also recommended the role of the neighboring countries. I have mentioned that as the first country of migration, if it is not even a neighboring country, when people come there. The policies, the asylum policies, sometimes they do not even exist. If they exist there, they need to be harmonized with the support of the alliances from the Western European Union, especially. The lack of access to labor market, they do not have that. There is lack of opportunities of participation, social and political participation. So these are the things that could be pushed. In Iran, for example, for Afghans, you already know that there are no-go places for Afghans, and there are restrictions for the specific professions that Afghans and migrants and refugees are not allowed to get these specific professions. And then there, the documentation of this that could be facilitated. Only UNHCR reports 800,000 Afghans having document, but actually they claim that there are over 2 million Afghans living within Iran. And they do have a legal national framework in Iran, but in Pakistan that even does not exist. People do not have any document based on which they are understood or recognized as asylum seekers or as refugees there, that they get the specific rights, and so what to do in the future. Those are the things that could be worked. UNHCR, for example, gave some statistics that in the last few days and weeks, approximately 1,000 people have arrived to Iran. So that is actually, you think, really, you have asked them to keep the borders open. There are thousands of them behind the borders. And externalization of this whole thing, somehow you see that these neighboring countries are also learning from the strategies of the West. They're now trying to build camps, in the most externalized part of, borders with Afghanistan, to keep people within these reception camps. So those are the things that could be prevented. And then coming to your other question, I'm sorry, I already forgot what the second question was. If you could just remind me of
Yeah, sure. It was more about the mobility aspirations and capabilities of the people. I mean, so we have discussed a lot about at the macro level, what could be done. But what do we know, actually? What is the knowledge accumulated on the aspirations and capabilities of Afghan migrants already, was the question.
Actually, those who, there are people, when you are at risk, at the moment that you are trying to save your lives, you use any capability, any possibility to run somewhere to save your life. If you think about the economic capabilities of people, some, might not have that. Actually, we can talk about the pandemic has hit the economy of people, and the poorer has become poorer and poorer. Actually, there are some who, actually, there are many, I should say, who will not have this opportunity or this capability to reach to the borders. And when they are so discouraged and see the photos and the discouraging videos, there are people. Today I was talking, there is a family with 5 daughters waiting behind the borders of Pakistan for 5 days now, 5 days and nights, somewhere behind the border with the children, with women and children. So, and they are still not getting discouraged. They are staying there with the hope that the border will be open today or tomorrow.
And I may also just take it up from there, because this is really the micro perspective that I've been working on for the last 6 years. And what I really want to stress is that desire or aspirations change. So when I just talked to my colleague, my brilliant colleague in Kabul now today, who realized she will not be evacuated, her main goal today is burning all her books, because she's afraid that when the Taliban are checking her house in the upcoming days as an academic, this will be her crime. So her goal right now is not even getting money anymore. Her goal is burning everything that she ever wrote, deleting her contacts and burning her books. I talked to my friends in Iran yesterday, and their aim, actually, they've been living in Iran for the past 20 years. They do not have official status. Their goal is actually finding education for their girls that goes beyond high school. Now girls are allowed, Afghan girls with a refugee status are allowed to enter high school, but chances to go to university are very low. It's really hard to get a health insurance, and it is Afghans are confined within certain ostans, like a certain areas, like federal states, not moving. So this would be their aim, to move further. When I talk to Afghan friends of mine who are in Turkey right now, who have been there for the last 4 years trying to get money to move onwards, they are working in the textile sector. They are afraid of deportation. Their goal is to stay as hidden as possible, working the most dangerous jobs or those that are given to them, and kind of navigating their way through without being deported. When I talked to my friends on the Greek islands right now, with Moria 2 or Karatepe, they hope to be actually sent to the islands just to be sure and more getting their papers done, because they've been in Moria for 2 years now, despite the fire, despite their papers getting somehow managed further. And when I then did my research on the Bosnian-Croatian border, people there are trying in Bihać to still cross the border, and they are hoping not to be beaten by the Croatian police, not to be robbed, not to be sent back. And then when I just talked to my friend here in Germany, actually she arrived, but she's empty. She's looking for psychosocial support. She's trying to learn a language. She's trying to cope with all of this. So although they are all Afghans, although they've all left Afghanistan at different stages in the last 20, 40 years, their needs are different. And still, this is all part of the broader thing. And this is more the micro perspective. And I'm really happy we talked about the macro, but changes along the route change. And this all being said, at the same moment when borders are being fortified, when new technologies are put into place to keep all those I was just talking about even further in their space, to prevent any kind of movement towards Western Europe.
Thank you very much, Hannah. I think we have still some time for two more questions, I hope at least. One thing that I've been really meaning to ask you, and Masuma has already talked about this a little bit, about the overemphasis, so to say, that we pay to what's happening now at the Kabul International Airport, and really not paying that much attention to the rest of what's happening in the country. So my question is to all of you, actually, what do you think is missing in the? There's a lot of discussions. There's a lot of knowledge that we're trying to keep up with. What is missing in the discussion, in your view, that you think needs to be really a part of this discussion, and it's important to raise it? So if you want to elaborate on that, and potentially why do you think this is missing, that would be great.
Maybe I can start. I think it's a very important question with regards to. We need more Afghan voices in this, and I'm particularly very grateful that you invited me and Masuma Can here. We need more Afghan voices, and we need also to open our ears towards Afghan voices that maybe hurt us. Yeah, that also put their fingers within the wound that is hurting. Yeah. But we also need to find solutions, and we need to find those solutions, as Masuma Can was already mentioning, with the Afghan diaspora, with the Afghan refugee community, and with Afghans inside and outside of Afghanistan. This cannot be done without us anymore. And for this, we also need to become visible, need to take this opportunity and be visible and make our voices heard. This is really important, and we're seeing this recently in the media. We have people, we have media outlets that are inviting Afghan voices, that are showing Afghan voices, but it's more people sometimes they want to show the victim, you know, they want to show the sad person, they want to show the person who is still, even when you kick in his face, he or she is still grateful for this, you know what I mean? And we need a change within this whole the discourse. And for this, I have the feeling we need more alliances. We need a lot of support within wherever we are, with our other organizations, with other civil society members and actors. And also the Afghan community needs to unite in this issue and say, okay, enough of this. We cannot talk about the past and say, okay, the Soviets have been doing this, the Iranians, Pakistanis, the Saudis, and the Americans have been doing this. Now we're seeing this whole notion of the international community and the Western values have been doing this for 20 years. So we have to change our minds in this and say, okay, look, if we cannot trust each other, if we cannot become united in this and find an all Afghan solution for this, it will continue for the next 40 years. So I think it's very important, and I have to also point out that one thing that has started right now in this regard is a unity among a lot of Afghans outside of Afghanistan. I just hope that the focus will be shifted towards more important issues, and not only to saying that, okay, we have to sanction Pakistan and such other things. On Saturday there will be a huge global demonstrations, a lot of demonstrations in over 40 cities. And I want people who have empathy with the Afghanistan cause to join us. In Berlin, it will start at 2 o'clock at the Rotes Rathaus, and in many other different cities and countries that will also take place on Saturday. So, and we have to, as Masama John also already mentioned, in this regard, we have to keep this whole Afghanistan issue alive, not only until the German elections, but also beyond that, and maybe for the next couple of years, because now we are a lot of people, as Hannah also pointed out, and we are seeing this in many other contexts. Everybody is hurt. Everybody who invested a lot of energy and a lot of their emotions in Afghanistan and time in the last 20 years, particularly from the civil society, everybody is sick of it, and everybody wants to change something. So I hope we can keep this up. I'm sorry to take such a long time for this.
No worries. Thank you very much. Nader?
Yeah, I cannot agree more, Kava. Just want to add to that there is also this moment now to rethink the whole, the way policies, made here in Germany, in the West in general. For a long time, they were announcing that Afghanistan is not safe for German citizens, but they were deporting Afghan asylum seekers from Germany to Afghanistan. We had these overall reports all the time, that overestimate, how good is the situation in Afghanistan, basically to justify such deportation, as others mentioned. For me, apart from the urgent things, and also basically rethinking the situation, is to also think about the kind of question and concerns raised here, because it can tell a lot about the situation here in Europe also. So when in the middle of this disaster, the main concern is that will it be another wave of migrants coming? It's telling a lot about Europe, basically. It's telling about the kind of mentality, the kind of perspective they hold, and they cannot be a part of a better future for Afghanistan unless they change this attitude to the countries in the south, this neo-colonial relation that they try to enforce, and also normalization of the horrors going on, elsewhere. To me, evacuation sounds, when they talk about it as such, it sounds more like a charity things to just like get away with all crimes, all the horrible things we did in Afghanistan, So with helping with some people move from Afghanistan, this will not be solved. As Kaveh said, we need Afghans coming together and contribute to the future of the country without any illusion, that this help will come from outside, because we see.
Okay, thank you, Nader. Okay, relatedly, we have to slowly come to an end here. So I would like to ask you all, what is it that you would like the audience to walk away with after this panel from your contribution? If you were to give one main message, what would you like that to be? And Hannah, maybe you can start.
I think I can just, with my hope, second everything that Kava just said. And what to walk away with would be that right now we need safe passages, but also we need, for those who actually reach borders, that European law is being fulfilled, that people can seek asylum, and that these processes are being just really enabled in the right ways. But then also that once people arrive, that there are the right support mechanisms, and that the fear of deportation has to stop. I think that's to break it down.
Okay, you may go in on the order you want. Nader, Masuma, Kava, who would like to say their last words, so to say.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll take this last opportunity for the closing words to say, let's, since we are from different universities and, with different expertise, take this as as a case study, actually, to see why this happened as it happened. The role of the different stakeholders, what went wrong, and why did it take so long that the people get to know, 20 years. If that was a failure, why didn't we get to know that after 5 years, after 10 years? Not after 20 years, for example, now. And then let's also not forget those who are left behind, actually, those who do not have the opportunity to get out, although they want to. So that is actually to focus on the implementation of the humanitarian aid that could be, somehow facilitated, should be as decentralized as possible by the local, very local communities. Not everyone, for example, those minorities, those of, for example, specific ethnic groups, vulnerable groups such as women, for example, it is very sad to see all the Afghan Sikhs and Hindus are leaving Afghanistan forever going to India. It does not happen to all the vulnerable ethnic groups. Where should, for example, Hazaras go? Where should the other vulnerable ethnic groups who have very past, very dark history with this group, where should they go? So that is something that should keep actually us busy thinking and finding a solution for in the future. So thank you very much.
May? Okay. I don't know if I have a message. I can share my feeling, and it's a feeling of shame and anger, both as a researcher or as a citizen of Iran living in Germany, for not doing enough, basically not caring enough, and not talking about this marginalization of Afghans in knowledge production, in politics, and hope that we need to come together, basically, and do something about it, because it's either, I can tell this from as someone coming from Iran, but I think it's relevant for everyone, As I said in the beginning, it shows us we will be either all safe, all free, or none of us. So we cannot just ignore what happened somewhere else, and feel that nothing will happen to us, basically, or yeah.
Thank you very much, Nader. Kava?
Yeah, my last words. I mean, I think I said everything that I wanted to say. But lastly, what I also wanted to add was what Hannah said, that those who are within our responsibility, within our borders, they should be treated with dignity now, and they should be. The focus should be also on the integration programs. The so-called integration programs should focus, and and on Afghan migrants. They were excluded in the last 7 years. They should be included now. That the needs of the Afghan communities should be taken seriously now. and also the whole idea of deportation. It's one of those humiliating things that is happening in the last decades. Actually, this has to stop within the European borders, because I have the feeling that the European countries are waiting for a so-called Taliban stabilization, for the reopening of their embassies there, and so that they continue deporting Afghans. And so will also Iran and Turkey and other countries. So we have to stick together in this, and then and definitely point towards these inhumane actions by democratic countries.
Okay, thank you very much. So it remains Masuma, Hannah, Nader, Kava, my heartfelt thanks really to all of you for making us hear all these voices that we needed to hear, and we needed to add to the debate that we've been having currently, and pointing to the ways in which the international community should really rise up to the challenge and take its responsibility. I also would like to thank, of course, our audience for their intriguing questions, and everyone behind the scenes who made this talk possible. Thank you very, very much, and we will see you hopefully in our next DeZIM talk again. Bye. The international